This is Byron. I have Marcy Stamper and Frankie Waller here with me. Welcome to Voices of the Methow.
This is Marcy, and I'm looking forward to the interview, learning more about Frankie's life.
Thank you. This is Frankie, and I'm prepared to answer any questions, and I've got a list of things to tell you. Thank you.
Thanks, Frankie. Well, Marcy and I are going to team up, and we're going to have a conversation with Frankie here. Frankie, you've had an interesting life.
Very interesting.
Well, you told me that you'd like to share some of your life, not only as a record for your family, but also for people who might be interested as well. Is that right?
That's correct.
Well, why don't we start off at the beginning? You were born at home on Moccasin Lake Ranch near Winthrop, Washington. Have I got that right?
That's correct. My mother's mother, my grandmother, Ella Lyons, birthed me, and I was supposed to be Frank Jr., the second son. I didn't turn out that way, and so Grandma's idea was, hey, let's just add an IE on that and call her Frankie. So I have had to explain to people many times that I'm not Francis, I am Frankie. I grew up, of course, on Moccasin Lake Ranch, which was kind of lonely because my older sister and I had an older brother and an older other sister. My closest oldest sister was 10 years older than I, and then there was me, and then 7 years later, my younger sister, Donna, came along. So I played a lot with some of my mother's brother's family, who used to live probably between 2 and 3 miles from the ranch. There was nothing going on in between that. So we'd meet and we'd play hopscotch and crazy games and then turn around and come home. It was fun. And one of the girls of the family was my same age. So we became pretty darn good friends. So let's see, what else happened? Okay, my mother's parents, James and Ella Lyons, lived approximately less than 2 miles from where I live, right in town in Winthrop. And the house that they lived in is still standing, and used to be white with blue, and now it's blue with white shutters. So, but it's still there. And they used to have a huge silo and a huge barn, which took time on it, and there are only parts and pieces of those two things that are still standing, but they are in the lower level of the main house. My grandparents came from Kentucky. My grandmother's sister was here with a family that was called the Hensley family. You can delete this part if you'd like. But the husband, Hensley, was a member of the Ku Klux Klan in the valley here at that time. Not my parents nor grandparents. And they somehow decided they were going to go back to Kentucky, so they left the valley.
Well, that was in the early 20s, wasn't it?
Yes. My father was born in Winnebago, Minnesota, and he moved to Spokane, and he came here to the Methow when he was a young man looking for work. And Mother was here, and she had come with her family from Kentucky, and they met at a dance near Carlton. Mom was working for a well-to-do family, I guess you would say, called the Culvers, Culvers, who lived along the Twist Carlton Road. And Okay, let's go to elementary school. I guess is what is. No, before I do that, I have to mention that Mother was given about 20 bummer lambs. A bummer lamb had lost their mother at birth, or sometimes the mothers would have twins and not accept one of them. And this other sheep man gave her about 20 of those, which I need to tell you all about the sheep camp later. And I remember as a young child, sitting on the porch or watching or helping Mother. She would take kind of like a pop bottle, put a nipple on it, and feed the bummer lambs. And when I went to elementary school, of course, I went in Winthrop, and I did show Byron the tree where some of my friends and I would gather, and we would go out there at recess time and sit with the pine needles and the pine cones, and if somebody had any goodies with them, well, we shared the goodies. I had Mrs. Anderson was my first grade teacher. She was a very wonderful and caring kind of teacher, and she lived in the place where the new park is. It's along the highway and by the bridge coming out of town. Mm-hmm. And my second grade teacher was Mrs. Nickel. My third grade teacher was Mrs. King. And my fourth grade teacher was Miss Lundquist. And then she married Mr. Orr, who was there at our school, and she was my fifth and sixth grade teacher. And then I had Mr. Valdison as my seventh and eighth grade teacher. Mr. Valdison was a high school coach, football, basketball, and baseball. And the first 15 minutes after a game, he would talk to the seventh and eighth boys about the preceding high school game. The girls were allowed to visit very quietly. However, I sat in front of Louis Dipple, and I would sit to the right in my desk, and Louis would sit on the far left in his seat. We would talk to each other. One day, I guess we became too loud, and Mr. Vallison threw an eraser zipping between us. Wow. Louis Dibble was one of the only two people who contacted polio, and he had to walk with crutches and everything like that. But he was a great guy.
All right, so you mentioned that your mother's mother had birthed you, and I wondered, is that planned, or did your mother go into labor earlier than expected, or, were most children just born at home that way?
Actually, the answer to that question is that there was a doctor in the valley in Twist, and his name was Dr. Malzacker, and he was contacted. But, at that time, it took a little while to get even from Twist to Winthrop, and Moccasin Lake, of course, you are aware of where it is. So he arrived afterwards, and he said to my mother, "Good job." So I wish well and healthy, I guess.
Interesting. And you mentioned that she got these sheep, but they already had the ranch. What were they raising on the ranch?
They had crops, alfalfa, grain, and a few cattle. But cattle were the cash crop. We didn't eat beef. We ate venison. I grew up on venison, as well as most of the people in the valley, because everyone would use it for meals, and it was never just out shot in fun. It was for a purpose of feeding the family. Can I say something here. I forgot something that I think is kind of interesting. My great-grandmother came to America alone and pregnant when she was 16. She'd
Wow.
been made pregnant by a member of the aristocracy who was a Protestant. Bridget could not stay in Ireland in her Catholic community, pregnant and unwed. Her parents put her on a boat, knowing they would never see her again. Once in America, she married Jack Leahy. It was not unusual for rich Protestant land-owning men to have affairs with young Irish girls. And when they became pregnant, the father of the child would sometimes arrange a marriage for the girl in America, which happened. And I have a picture because my cousin kept some of this information and sent me, and I have a picture of my great-great-grandparents and my grandmother. So my grandmother married David H. Morse, I think in Spokane. I don't know too much about him. They never lived together. Yeah, they lived together, I guess, to have 10 children, but that was the end of it. And then my grandmother lived with my Uncle Emery until her passing.
Do you mean that when she was sent here at age 16, they had already set up this marriage here for her?
Well, I'm assuming so because I received this information from my cousin and my Aunt Margaret. That's another story. I have two amazing aunts, one on each side of the family that I need to talk about later. But she had picked this up from her mother with the pictures of not only my great-grandparents, but my grandparents. So I was pretty happy to get that.
You were mentioning the ranch, you were mainly growing alfalfa and grains. You weren't really raising many animals, just a few cows, right?
Right. I was still a young girl. This fellow who used to be a sheep man, and he knew my father, obviously, Mr. Albert Trieber. He gave her about 20 bummer lambs, and so she raised them on the bottle until they were old enough to eat the hay and things like that. And so then Dad bought additional ewes, and they were in the business.
You were talking about going to play with your cousins, but you didn't have a lot of chores on the ranch because it seems usually kids who grow up on a farm don't have that much time to play.
Well, I never was out in the fields. I helped my mother. My mother always planted a huge garden, and she also planted her flowers in the garden. And that was my chore, to help her weed the garden. The other was she had chickens, and the other was to help her feed the chickens. Occasionally the chickens would get out, and Mother would be trying to get them back in, and she would throw rocks at them. And after a while, she decided to quit that because she was a pretty good shot. She'd hit them right in the middle of the head, and they'd be dead, and we'd clean chicken. She's much better than I am at that. So I did have a lot of free time to visit with my cousins, but it was just every 4 or 5 days or something or other. It wasn't daily or anything like that. And then when I began to read, I've always been a reader, I guess you would say. And of course, Mother always saw that I had some kind of a child's book to look through.
Now, Frankie, you had some family in the neighborhood, right? That you could visit your aunt maybe or something. You were saying
Was
something about.
yes, I had said that to Marcy that I had visited with my cousins, um, and it was my mother's brother and his wife who lived, oh, 2.5 or 3 miles away, and there was nothing in the sagebrush out there, so we would meet and play hopscotch and all the kinds of foolish games, kids, racing up and down, see who could get there first, and that sort of thing. So, my older sister, by the time I got to be 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, she was married and was starting a family, as well as my brother and my oldest sister. So I was kind of alone, but I didn't feel alone. my parents always made me feel like I was welcome and special.
Right. I mean, it's kind of unusual, it seems to me, for children to be that widely spaced, particularly that long ago.
Yeah. Needless to say, it was, I think, a surprise when I came along and then my younger sister came along, But that was their faith that they would raise the children they had.
Okay, so Frankie, you mentioned your mother worked for this wealthy family. What was she doing for them?
Just housework, whatever needed to be done. I guess you'd call it a maid.
Okay.
They were very kind to her, and she was very happy doing that. Of course, until she met my father, and they were married. Right after they were married, they lived in the Twist Carlton, I call it. It's mostly toward Carlton. That they lived there until Dad bought the ranch, what was there, and then they moved to this old house, very old house. We had an outdoor potty. And then in 1941 is when Dad built the block house that stands now, that's close to the Patterson Lake Road. He did a lot of the helping build and et cetera. And there was a downstairs with a good big kitchen, because by this time there were people that came that were hay people, and finally the sheep people, and all of this. And Mother was always very, very, very good cook, and I did what I was supposed to do to help with that. Downstairs there was the kitchen, the dining room, and we always called it the office. But that's also, Dad had a roll top desk. Sure wish I had that. Anyway, and a couch in there. He was always up early in the morning changing the water, because he irrigated by a piece of canvas and make it down, and then run the water out into the fields. So he was up early in the summer mornings going there. So after lunch, he would take a 30-minute nap. Never had to tell him how to get up. He just was 30 minutes, and he was up and out again, which was amazing to me. And when he built the house there, he built a freezer. It was it must have been 5 by 8, and put shelves in there. And when Mother would freeze things, all sorts of kinds of things, that was another, I was to help with that, and she would put it in the freezer. But just outside the freezer was called the refrigerator. And it was just where the milk, the eggs, the things like that were kept. And it was just a little bit larger. The length of it was a little longer, maybe the same width. Then there were three, what I called motor room, because it ran the furnace, and then two other. One was the canning room, and then one was just for odds and ends, and another room that was used as a bedroom and a bathroom, and a two-car garage, and the stairs going to the upstairs area, which was another kitchen, dining room, living room, 3 bedrooms, a bathroom. And Dad was liked to look over his land, I guess you would say. Huge windows in the upstairs dining area and living room. So I lived pretty special after I got up there.
And how long did they own the ranch?
I think it. Oh, darn! I should have really looked that up.
Oh, that's no problem. I can jump in there. On my notes, the ranch was bought in 1925, evidently, and sold in 1961.
Okay. I kind of think it's 64 instead of 61, but I'm not positive.
Right. So that was pretty much their whole.
That was their
most of their lives.
Most of their lives there at Moccasin Lake Ranch. And my brother and my father were both really pretty smart people, and they took some water from what is called now Liar's Creek. Little story behind that, too. Anyway, and they put in a cement pipe all the way up Moccasin Lake to keep more water in the lake, and then they started watering out of the lake. Until that time, they did not do that. And the story behind the Liar's Creek was there were neighbors who said that he was stealing their water. And it even went to court. That's how it got. It used to be Thompson Creek, and then they started calling it Liar's Creek because Dad said, no, he didn't take all of the water. He was only taking some of it. But he wasn't prosecuted, so I guess somebody believed what he said. I don't know. I wasn't involved in that.
Your family really, over the years, did some significant irrigation work, and for irrigating the fields and moving water around.
They were very knowledgeable, and I don't know where that knowledge came from. My dad and my brother is how they figured out to put the cement piping into Moccasin Lake. I was told, I did not see this, I was told that they set
take your time.
a telescope kind of like thing that they could map out which would be the best route to move this water from the creek to Moccasin Lake. They did that all by themselves. They got, I know this, that the cement pipe came from the Columbia Concrete Company, and it is still in business between Okanagan and Omak. This is a sideline. On my 60th birthday, two friends, my lifetime friend, Lucy Lloyd Stewart, and a friend that had just moved there. Her husband was the principal here in Winthrop, Arlene Arneson. I said, hey, you guys, let's go up there and celebrate my birthday and take a picnic lunch, which we did, which was a very wonderful birthday present. We had fun.
I want to back up for just a minute, Frankie. I remember we talked a little bit about the wasn't there a creamery in Winthrop? Did you?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay. Mother always had a cow. Dad said she could have a cow if she wanted it, but he wasn't milking the cow. She had to milk her own cow, which she did. And then she would put it in a container, very good size, and take it into Winthrop to the creamery. And then they would buy the cream from her, and that's how she got her spending money, milking the cow. And everyone did that. Lots and lots of people. From Mazama on, I don't know, because they also had kind of a place in Twist, so it was really in the Winthrop Mazama area, Twin Lakes, Bear Creek, and Wolf Creek, and that sort of thing. But it was taken then to the creamery in Omak.
Well, Frankie, this has been really fun and interesting. Thanks for sharing some of your life with us.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Marcy.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm impressed with how detailed your memories are.
All right.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Frankie.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
Have
Alrighty.
a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.